Colonel William E. Missildine, United States Army, Vietnam. Colonel Missildine served 2 tours in Vietnam and was commissioned an officer at the age of 20 in 1955. He was 77 years old when I met him in Destin, Florida. It was March the 5th, 2012. Unfortunately, Colonel Missildine passed away several months later after the interview, fought the greatest battle of his life with cancer. So he's one of my veterans up in heaven, and I know I'll see him again someday. But he tells a great story, folks. The combat he experienced, his story is very unique. It's not your typical frontline combat story, but it's there. But you'll see what I mean. But it's an amazing story from a commander's perspective of Vietnam and a lot of other things that we talked about too. So, amen. I want to thank Dennis Webb for sponsoring this story. Dennis, I'd look into this camera. Thank you, sir, for your willingness to help me feature these stories and to tell Bill's story today. I'm grateful, Dennis, and I just appreciate your dedication to our veterans and our country. God bless you. Folks, I'd like to encourage you to sponsor one of these stories. I have hundreds and hundreds of them that nobody has seen in my archives, and my heart's full as I share these stories with you. Bill's story has been sitting around for 11 years. It's time to we watch it. And I got a lot of stories like his. World War II, Korea, Vietnam, even the Gulf War, Iraq, and Afghanistan. So if you'd like to sponsor a story, I would encourage you to do so. There's information in the video description below this video and on my website, larrycapetto.com. Click on the link, Sponsor a Vet. Include the name of the veteran in the sponsorship. I would appreciate that. If you'd like to donate to my work, there's information in the comment section of this video. And folks, Voices of History Radio is rolling 24 hours a day, 7 days a week around the world. People are starting to listen to it. A lot of the stories that you see here on this YouTube video channel are being aired around the clock on the Voices of History Radio. I listen to it all day long, in my car, on my phone, when I'm taking a shower, when I'm waking up. People who commute to and from work, truck drivers, and I'm really focusing on our students. I encourage you and I challenge you to share this radio station with a student. Maybe somebody in your family, somebody you know down the street. Share it with a student. Reach out to them, because this is living history. This is why we're free, folks. This is why we have the freedoms today that we have. It's because of our veterans. So I want you to share this radio station with them, and I think they'll be the better for it, okay? Thank you for subscribing to this channel, watching these videos and these broadcasts, and I hope to talk to you again soon. Thank you. Pray for some things for your body there, but tell me, can I ask you how old you are, Bill?
I'm 77.
Okay, and what year did you go into the military?
I graduated from Marietta High School in 1953. Tried to work at Lockheed and go to school concurrent with that. Could not do it, so I volunteered for the draft when I was 19. Went through basic training, did very well on the examinations, and they asked me to please go to OCS. I did that, and I was commissioned when I was 20.
And what year was that?
This would have been 1955.
Okay. So you were a little too young for the Korean War.
Well, I was, yes, yes.
And then tell me how you ended up in Vietnam, and tell me you were in Special Forces, so you probably had 5 or 10 years before that even began. So just walk me into that, your military career.
Yeah, okay. Well, I was very fortunate. I started out jumping out of airplanes, and that paid me $110 a month. That was a nice car payment in those days. But I started out at Fort Bragg, went to Fort Campbell, served with some great people like Norm Schwarzkopf, among others. Norm and I were big buddies for a long time. Then I went to Berlin, which was a fantastic assignment. And when I came back, I went to the Presidential Honor Guard, the 3rd Infantry at Fort Myer. While I was there, I was selected to be a White House social aide for John F. Kennedy, which sounds like a great thing, but you're nothing more than an usher in the White House. And then I went to the career course, went early, And when I came out of it, I finished up Ranger School, and I said, there's a war over there, I want to go to Vietnam. And so I went to Vietnam in '63. Was there for 12 months. I was up country. One guy, Sergeant Jarosik, great guy, NCO. He and I were up country. The nearest American was 70, 80 miles away. And we were on Highway 19, and this might be too much detail for you, Larry, but we were on Highway 19. That ran from Quy Nhon, which was one of the ports, up over the mountains into Pleiku and Kon Tum, two major provinces facing Cambodia. And we had a lot of military people going in and a lot of convoys going through the mountains. And a guy named Bernard Fall wrote a great book called Street Without Joy, and it had to do with the 100 French mobile group. You remember what happened in Dien Bien Phu? The Vietnamese just wiped them out. Well, they were trying to withdraw this 100 French mobile group from An Khê, and the Viet Cong ambushed them and killed 780 of them. Only about 20 of them escaped. Now, that was my job, to keep that road open. I had a Vietnamese battalion. I had a Ranger company, I had a platoon 105s, a platoon of 81 mortars, and a company of M8 armored cars. Now, I got pulled out of there to go south of Saigon to be anti-coup troops. And the guy who replaced me, I said, please, Joe, watch this area. 3 months after I left, they ambushed an ammunition convoy going on Highway 19. And I came back and went back, and I got the book out from Bernard Fall and compared where the placements were. And they were exactly the same place that they were for 100 French Mobile Group. So probably the same Viet Cong commander who was there back in 1953 was there in 1964. So someone once said, wiser than I, if we don't learn from our mistakes, we'll often repeat them. But anyway, I came out of Vietnam and went to a brief ROTC assignment, and then got selected for Command General Staff College. Colin Powell lived from here right down the street from me, and he and my wife, our wives were great friends. And then the Army was kind enough to help me bootstrap. I had been going to school on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays, so they gave me 6 months to get my undergraduate degree, and that was wonderful. And then they said, we want to send you to Vietnam, Bill, but you're just a major now. You're promotable, and if we send you to Vietnam, you will not get a battalion. You won't be promoted until you're 6 months in country. We like your leadership. We like your demonstrated ability. How about sending you down to the Medical Field Service School and get you promoted and send you to Vietnam to get a battalion? So I went down there, and I'm getting ready to go to Vietnam, and all of a sudden I get called, and they said, the Chief of Staff of the United States Army has looked at your folder, and you've been selected to go into a very unique program and go over and be one of 44 people working in the 44 provinces. So I went to State Department school for 6 months, learned how to speak Vietnamese, which I don't get to use it anymore, but I used it when I was in country. And then I went over, and that was an 18-month tour. And had some wonderful experiences, one of which I'd like to tell you about in terms of combat experiences. I don't tell people about what I did individually. I don't tell people how many people I've killed, how many ambushes I've set up. I don't talk about those kind of things. And when I first went over, I captured some pictures of some dead Viet Cong. And I was chastised very severely. We don't do that kind of stuff. But anyway, I came back and got a battalion at Fort Ord, California, which was a great assignment for me. And I then went to the Army staff, and I was there 19 months and got selected to go to the National War College, which only about 5% of all the officers ever commissioned get to go to the National War College. And I went there, and while I was there, they helped me get my MBA. And I came out of that, went back into the Pentagon and worked on the Joint Staff. So I have Army staff and Joint Staff. And then I came out on the alternate command list and did not get activated. And if you don't get an 06 command, you probably aren't going to be promoted to general officer. So I said, I'm going to retire, send me to Atlanta. So they sent me to Atlanta and ended up giving me a recruiting brigade. I had 11 states and the Virgin Islands and Panama Canal Zone, had 2,000 people working for me. And it was a great assignment, but I told them I was going to retire, so I retired with a 28-year service. And then went to work for a company as a motivational speaker. Yeah. And I've traveled all over the States, most of Europe. I didn't ever do anything in Japan, but I really enjoyed getting up in front of people and talking to them and getting them smiling and asking them leading questions and getting them to agree that they need to do something about their financial future. But I have a wife, 2 delightful children. My son's a tennis pro. My wife has a real passion for Elvis Presley. She has every movie he's ever made. She has every DVD that's ever been recorded. She has a small library of 15 or 20 books. And I think it's fantastic. And we go on Elvis cruises. She loves to go to Tupelo, which is where Elvis was born, because my daughter is a buyer for a major department store there. And then she goes into Memphis and goes to Graceland. So we're living a good life.
Well, that's awesome. Back in Vietnam, you were there for 1 or 2 tours?
I was there for a full tour, and then I went into the special tour, which was an 18-month tour.
So, I mean, I'm not real clear with your story now. Special Forces meaning 101st? I mean... No. Special Forces, yeah, it's a very... Special Ops is a better way of describing what I did. I did not wear a green beret. I was in Special Ops. I worked with the CIA. I had a CIA guy on my staff. And tell me about what rank are you at this time?
Well, I go in country as a captain, come out as a captain. I go in country as a lieutenant colonel.
So your thoughts of Vietnam back then, and even now looking back, I mean, your job being there, the morale of the troops, I mean, what are you involved with in all of that?
Well, I'm very distressed about what happened over there. Just an example, my brother, was 3 years older than I was. When I went to OCS, he was a sergeant. He said, this can't be. My little brother's not going to be senior to me, so he applied for OCS too, and went to OCS and became a helicopter pilot. I'm there in '64. He comes over as a helicopter pilot. He's in Kontum, which is 90 kilometers from where I am, and he'd come over and pick me up, and I'd fly door gunner for him on Sundays. He spent 12 months there, went back to Fort Rucker, taught for a year, went back to Vietnam for a year, went back to Fort Rucker, taught for a year, went back to Vietnam, was wounded in his 3rd tour, and was medevac. He subsequently died when I'm still in Vietnam, and I flew home in uniform into San Francisco and got off the airplane and walked into the terminal, and 3 guys were standing there, and one of them spit on me. Now, you know, I could have killed the guy. I'm trained with my hands to kill people. And I started to do it, and I thought to myself, this is so sad. I would not be doing me a favor or anybody else, and so I just walked on through. There's some things that I could tell you about happened in Vietnam that are just shocking. But I had War Zone D, and I've got a long-range reconnaissance patrol out, and this young captain calls in and he says, sir, I've got a reinforced NVA battalion with some heavy weapons at these coordinates. And I said, well, let me get an arc light diverted. I know there's one coming in country now. Arc lights were B-52 strikes. So I called this 2-star general I'm working for, and I said, General, I've got a reinforced NVA battalion with some heavy weapons in the northern part of War Zone D, just north of me, and I want to divert that arc light that's coming in here instead of Long Bend. He said, Bill, you know I can't divert that. The President of the United States, LBJ, chooses exactly where those aircraft will go, and we have no control of it on the ground. It's just like North Vietnam. You catch some of the F-4 pilots that flew out of Udorn, and they would fly up to Haiphong, and they'd see Russian ships offloading missiles, surface-to-air missiles. And you know the rules of engagement were, do not engage until they deploy those missiles to be fired against you, and then and only then can you do it. We had the men, we had the firepower, we had everything we needed, but we didn't have the tactics because we were constrained. So I'm very unhappy. And the thing that really bothered me was the fact that my country didn't support me doing what I was being told to do. But I'm truly elated now that our nation loves the people who are over there doing tough, difficult jobs. And I'm really pleased.
So you had men under your command in Vietnam?
Yes.
Did you lose men during
yeah, well, you do that. You know, it's just a given that you're going to lose them. You just hope you've done the best thing you can do to get them into a position where they can recover, and you do the right things in engaging the enemy and so forth. But that's the nature of war. People are going to get killed.
So are you ground missions? You doing air missions? What are you doing? I mean,
I'm ground oriented.
Okay,
Yeah,
So
and
Army-
when I say ground oriented, I had my own helicopters, and if I wanted to pick up a company, I could pick it up and move it to a certain area and block off another area if I had forces sweeping into that area. So,
Can you tell me a couple of the engagements that you had with your companies? And
well, I'll tell you about one that I really think is interesting. What we do there is we have a home base where we have our normal mess halls and we have our barracks and everything, and normally those are pretty well surrounded by defensive troops and what have you. But when we're trying to get into areas we've not been in before, such as War Zone D, it was a special area, we put fire bases in. And that's an intermediate place where we can put troops in and on a daily basis send out patrols and find the targets and then engage the targets with air or whatever. Well, I went out on one of these fire bases one day, and I'm there, and it got kind of dark in the evening, and we had probably 60 guys there. And the way we build fire bases is we go in with Agent Orange, defoliate, then we send D7 dozers in, and they clear the area, all the dead trees and the NIPA and everything else, and then they build you a berm, and that's the outside of your fire base. And then they go in and they put a CP, a command post in, and normally that's down in the ground with heavy cover. And then we build foxholes and everything. We put double concertina around the fire base. And then you sit there and you start sending out your patrols, where I'm there waiting to see what was going to happen the next day, and about 2 o'clock in the morning we got some mortar fire. And we got some RPGs from the woods. And I got on my radio and called back to my command post, and I'm not getting anybody there. And all of a sudden, I hear this voice on my radio. It says, Eagle, this is Bluebird. And I said, who are you? He says, I'm up over you, and I'm here to provide support to you. And I said, support? What are you flying? He says, I've got a C-130. And I said, well, I know a little about C-130s. You've got 40 millimeter rounds, you've got 50 on the side, and your only opportunity to engage is when you have line of sight. You've got to see your targets to engage. And he said, don't worry, Eagle, I've got a 105 Howitzer in my airplane. And now, I don't know what you know about 105s. They're artillery pieces. We have 105s, we have 155s, we have 8Hs, and they all have different ranges and different size of rounds. But generally, 105s, when we have 105s, we survey them in with an aiming circle. We determine very precisely where they are on the face of the earth by coordinates, and we dig the trails, the legs in, so they're immobile. And I said, you have a 105? And he said, yes, I can use it. And I said, not from an airplane, not to support me. And he said, trust me. And he said, give me some coordinates, and I'll put a round there. And I said, okay. I gave him some coordinates 200 meters out in front of me, and I said, put a white phosphorus round in there. And he says, on the way, wait. Splash. And I looked out, and this great big white phosphorus round went off, and I said, I like that. So I dropped down 50 meters and dropped down 50 meters, and finally, the bursting radius of those things are about 25, 30 yards, so you don't get any closer, but I had him almost in my wire. And slowly but surely, all the fire coming from outside dissipated. And I said, thank you very much, Bluebird. I'll buy you a drink the next time I see you. I had no idea where he came from. I didn't know, but he left, and next morning we went out, and the NVA were very good. If you killed them, they took their wounded away, and certainly they took their dead away. We went out the next day, and we put bodies together. We found 47 bodies out there. So I love the Air Force. I wished I could live like that, but we old Army soldiers, we sleep on the ground. We don't have air-conditioned billets, and yeah.
tell me what division or company or brigade you're with, and all the details there.
Well, basically what I was controlling were company-sized units, because
But is it the 103rd? Or?
no, this was a separate special ops type unit. So what I had was I had my own military personnel. Hey, thank you very much. And I also had an ARVN division there with me that I was able to use.
But are you with an infantry division, or, I mean, guys are like with the 35th Infantry, the 2nd Company?
No, I'm not with a designated unit, okay? I'm with an advisory group.
Okay.
And again, there were 44 of us in country, and depending upon the nature of the terrain we were in, where it was located, the size of the advisory element varied. I had about 4 lieutenant colonels that worked for me, I had about 20 captains that worked for me, and a lot of NCOs that worked for me.
What was the most difficult part of your job in Vietnam?
I think the most difficult part of my job in Vietnam was to get the people that we were trying to work with, the Vietnamese, to be conscious about what they were doing and dedicated to what they were doing. And, you know, those poor people, you know, it's kind of like what we're facing in Afghanistan now and Iraq. We have people that have no education whatsoever. They're not motivated. They're just trying to survive. And trying to get them to work together as a united force was very, very difficult. Now, you know, they saved us sometimes, but they had special units that we called forward, and they rallied to us. But on balance, the first group I dealt with was the 25th Infantry Division, Arvin Division. And it's kind of interesting. We'd go out on patrols, and we'd pick up some Viet Cong guys, and the guy I was dealing with, the battalion commander, who had worked for the French, which made him kind of interesting. But we captured 3 Viet Cong one day, and he's talking to one of them, and I spoke a little Vietnamese then, and he said, "Tell me where your cave is." And the guy said, "No." He says, "Tell me where your cave is." The guy said, "No." He pulled his .38 pistol out, which we gave him. The officers had 38 police officials, and he pulled it out and said, "Tell me where your cave is." No. Shot him. Went to the second guy and said, "Tell me where your cave is." He says, "No." Shot him. Now when he got to the third guy, guess what? They told him where the cave was. But we, you know, it was the same thing we're going through right now. How do you interrogate? I don't feel you should shoot people. I don't think you should wound people, but I think you should mentally harass them enough that they're going to give you the information that you want. Waterboarding, I don't know. I just have trouble, and I'm having more trouble right now with where we are, with the president we have, and I don't really need to get into that, but it...
So, which tour was more difficult in Vietnam, the first or the second one?
Well, the first tour, I was on my own, and I had a great rapport with that young guy. I had a ranger company, and if you're a ranger, rangers have a unique interaction with other rangers. It's kind of like... I was fortunate enough when I was at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, we retired the 101st Airborne Division, and we were rebuilding it. And I'm a young second lieutenant, and they said, "Bill, we'd like for you to go out to Fort Chaffee, Arkansas, and recruit to fill up the 101st Airborne Division." I said, "Why me? And all these other guys have combat infantry badges, they're first lieutenants." I said, "Because we've watched you, and you're doing a good job with the troops that you're training." So I went out there, and interesting enough, I gave, well, I'm probably getting far afield here, but I had to recruit 50 people a month. And I would talk to a basic training company with 150 people. And I would get up and I would have close haircut, spit shine boots, tailored uniform, and I'd say, "Now you could wear this uniform. You could be among the elite in the United States Army today. Instead of just one of those guys out there, you could be an airborne soldier." And I'd say, "Okay, everybody who wants to go airborne, get up and move to the rear of the classroom." And nobody moved. I then found out herd instinct. So at the end of the presentation, I'd say, "Okay, I want everybody on their feet. Now I know that some of you signed up to go airborne when you came into the Army. I commend you. You're bright people. You want to be among the best. Now when I say move to the rear of the classroom, move. Now for those of you who did not sign up to go airborne and want to be part of the very best, when I say move, move. Ready? Move." 150 people moved to that classroom. And it was just exciting because if you were in an airborne unit, you were separate and apart. And then John F. Kennedy came along and said something about Green Berets are wonderful. And I looked at Green Berets. I had a friend that went into it. And at that point in time, they had a lieutenant colonel in charge of all the Special Forces units. Now, what you try to do is you try to stay competitive. And if you go to a Special Forces unit, there's one lieutenant colonel billet up there. If you stay airborne ranger, there's a captain, there's a major, there's a colonel, there's a general, and so you can progress. So I had great success with that ranger battalion. And we ran some great operations there. We ran some great ambushes and what have you. I got a Purple Heart for Val. I got a Purple Heart while I was there. I got a Bronze Star for Val. I got 2 more Bronze Stars on my later tour. But
So what am I missing in this story? Bronze Stars, Purple Heart, Ranger Battalion, the combat that you guys are experiencing. Are you going out on search and destroy missions? I mean, you have helicopters?
yeah, well, you're doing a couple of things. One, you're running long-range reconnaissance patrols, and they're called LRPs, and they had special rations for them. They were called LRP rations, because you don't heat anything, you eat everything cold. So you send people out. I would go out and take my sergeant and some of the Vietnamese Rangers, and we'd go out and set up on a trail. And we would observe the traffic coming through. If it was ambushable, if it was 10, 15 guys, we'd take them on. But in 1963, 64, we're looking at Viet Cong. We had no NVA forces. And the other thing we did is we realized that there were certain areas where there were villages which were controlled by the Viet Cong, and they were brutal. When they went into a village, they automatically called the head village chief in and killed him, and they took over. And we in turn would get information about the Viet Cong owning this village. We would go there and have a sweeping motion go through them. If we found them somewhere too far for us to walk, we had our own helicopters with gunships, and we'd go in and drop the troops and use some strategies, the hammer and the anvil and the hammer and those kind of things, which you probably don't know much about. But the anvil is where you put blocking forces in, and then you drop the hammer on the other side, and they come in and they force the people you're fighting to retreat, and they retreat into the anvil where they're blockaded, and you just destroy them, just wipe them out. We did a lot of that. Now, when I went back, bear in mind I'm a lieutenant colonel, I'm a little bit above going on LRPs, but I had a lot of LRPs that I sent out, and I had a lot of air mobile operations that I ran.
So these aren't Hueys yet, right?
We had Hueys.
You did have Hueys.
We had Hueys. We also had the Cobra. I didn't like the Cobra because the Cobra had a standoff distance of 1,000 yards. And the problem you have in Vietnam, you have something called conversion fog. And that warm air comes in air comes in off the Tonkin Bay out there and goes over the land, and it converts itself into fog. And normally you can't see where you're going until 11 o'clock. Now you've been here for a couple of days, you've seen our fog in the morning. And so I liked the Huey because the Huey could get down under that low cover and engage. I didn't like the Cobra because it had to stand off.
Was this 64 you're talking about, 1964?
No. In 63, 64, we had Hueys, had the Bravo models. And that was a fight within itself because we wanted to put machine guns and rockets and everything on that, and the Air Force said, no, we have the platforms for that.
Well,
So
in July of 65, isn't that when Johnson ordered the Air Mobile Division into Vietnam?
that's correct, out of Fort Benning.
That's what really started. And
That's what really started, yeah.
The enemy was seeing the tigers in the sky or whatever they call it.
Yeah.
All this stuff was starting to happen.
Yeah, that's correct. The second, I think it was first cav out of Fort Benning went over and went over en masse, yeah.
And but you're fighting with the Hueys at that time too, and the whole bit. So.
Well, we had limited Hueys. We didn't have airlift capability in 63, 64. We didn't have it until we got aviation battalions over there and what have you, and that came about in late 64 and 65. I'm
always intrigued with the Air Mobile Division and the helicopters, and because of the work that I've done with the Vietnam vets and the films that I've done, but. In my first documentary, it focuses on the Air Mobile Division and a lot of the ground troops. And so there's just this fascination with fighting a war. In World War II, we had the Higgins boats landing, the assault landings, and troops coming out. In Vietnam, the equivalent probably was the Hueys, the landings, and the hot LCs, and all that. I'm really intrigued by all that.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm asking.
Well, have you read that book, We Were Soldiers Once?
And the movie, seen the movie too.
Yeah, I've seen it 3 times. Hal Moore, I worked for Hal Moore. He was my division commander when I was a battalion commander.
He was a colonel, wasn't he a colonel?
Yeah, Lieutenant Colonel Hal Moore, and he went in with 2 companies, and he ran into that NVA division, and they kept bringing in more and more troops. He ended up with a brigade-sized unit there.
At Ia Drang? From the movie, it's Ia Drang Valley.
Al Shai Valley.
Was it?
I think it's Al Shai.
Well, whatever, but that's the whole story we're talking about.
Yeah. But that was not there when I was there in 63, 64. And when I went back, I had that capability. And I had a general that said, Bill, whatever you want, you know, I'll put some helicopters on your airfield out there to make them more responsive.
Did you go on any of those combat missions, or?
Oh yeah, yeah, very much so. But generally as a rule, you know, when you reach the rank of lieutenant colonel, you're the guy up there in the command and control helicopter, and you're watching what's going on, and you're calling in attack birds, and you're also maneuvering and what have you. It's a very rare occasion when you're going to land and actually get out with a weapon and fall into an attack line.
But you could see what's going on.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Did you see any helicopters ever getting shot out of the air? Or?
Oh, quite a few. Matter of fact, I was shot down one time. We went in auto rotation, yeah. I used to, a small thing, but I had my own helicopter. It was a Loach, and I had a pilot, and I flew right seat, and I had a door gunner. And those kids, I mean, they had, pardon me, they had testicles the size of basketballs, those little guys in the back and the pilots. And but we'd go out looking for targets. We'd fly the NIPA down the stream beds looking for targets in the morning, because that's when the Viet Cong were out moving around. And I had an M79, which was kind of like a shotgun, but it shot a 40 millimeter round. And I'd put a marking round in there, and then the Cobras would come in behind it and start shooting the area up. And we were out one day, and I learned to fly a helicopter because I was concerned if he got shot, who's going to fly the helicopter? And sure enough, he got wounded, and I had to land the helicopter. We put you know what auto rotation is? You reverse the props, and we came in. But I saw a lot of helicopters on the ground that were destroyed, burned. Yeah.
Well, how do you feel at that time, or you just don't think?
Well, you just think, God, you know, I wish I had more people on the ground to lessen the ground fire that's coming up. But, you know, the NVA got very, very successful in doing what they were doing with the machine guns, the 50 calibers, setting them on ridge lines. So when you were coming over in valleys, they were shooting down into you. But it was the nature of the beast. You just understood that. Second lieutenants had a very short lifespan over there. Privates were a little bit better because there were more of them. But it was just an expected thing that you're going to lose people. We lost, what, 53,000 people there. And tragically, a lot of those people were not killed in combat. They were killed as a result of accidents and things that were, but I'm happy we have that wall there.
I was going to ask you, have you been to Washington, D.C.?
Well, the wall was built while I was still there on the Joint Staff. And I go back to Washington. I have a lot of good friends up there. But altogether, I spent 2.5 years in the Old Guard at Fort Myer, which is an honor guard billet. I also spent a year there in the State Department school for this other job I had in Vietnam. I spent 2 years there on the Army staff, and I spent 2.5 years there on the Joint Staff, and a year in Senior Service College. Altogether, I had over 10 years in Washington, D.C.
But you've been to the wall?
Oh, yeah, a number of times.
So
yeah.
have you looked up any names?
Oh, yeah, I have a bunch of friends, yeah. And it's sad, but I know that they were good people, and I know that they were there trying to do the job that their nation asked them to do. So I don't know any cowards on that wall. Yeah.
Is Vietnam still a big part of your life?
Not too much. So some of my friends have gone back, and you know they go back and want to go in the tunnels and everything else. I was a tunnel rat for a short period there in 1964. I don't know if you know what they do.
Heard of the tunnel.
But you get down there with a flashlight with a 45. You know, you don't have much maneuverability. You can't carry a big weapon, so you just crawl along, and every once in a while you'll come to a widened place, and there might be a Viet Cong or two there, and you just hope you've been quiet enough getting there so they're not looking for you. But it's no fun crawling underground. But I really don't have any interest in going back. I really do not. I don't have many good feelings about Vietnam.
What do you think our country should learn about Vietnam, or have we learned anything? And I'm not talking politics. I'm just saying, you know, I know we welcome our troops home better today. I know that, but is there a lesson to be learned from?
Well, I think the main lesson that we all walked away, those of us who were warriors there in Vietnam, was we could have done a better job with the forces that we had available and with the tactics that we should have been using. Because politically we were constrained completely and totally. And you just don't put 500,000 people in a country the size of Vietnam and don't win the war. And that's what we had, over 500,000 people. So that's my bitterness about the Vietnam War, plus the fact our nation never accepted it. I think that what we have done now is we've exercised more aggressive posture in those countries that we've gone into. Iraq, we put a lot of people in there. And we went in with a lot of firepower, and we were unlimited pretty well in terms of how we used our firepower. And tragically now, we're losing the war in Afghanistan because we're being constrained so much. Because you just, you can't interrogate, it's just, those people over there, they're rough, coarse people. The Russians learned their lesson, and now we're on the verge of learning our lesson. This whole thing of burning the Koran, that whole issue, and now we've had at least 10, 12 people killed, personal kills by shooting them directly like that, and payback time. And yeah, we let them burn our flag. We let them do all kinds of things that, like in Iraq, if you remember, we had a couple of Marines that were captured, and they dragged them behind vehicles and they hung them from the bridges. And the Marines, a couple of days later, went into the village and shot it up pretty bad. Well, they court-martialed those young Marines that did that. So, I don't know. But Vietnam was a sad story, and we're on the verge of Afghanistan being an even worse story. Because, I don't know, I've never been an isolationist, but I think I'm almost to the point of becoming one. We've got troops all over the face of the earth. We've got people in Germany. The Warsaw Pact is not a threat to us. We're not worried about War Plan 4102 or the Russians coming through with all those tanks. Why are those people there in Germany? And there are a lot of other places we have troops. It just doesn't make sense.
Bill, what does freedom mean to you?
Freedom is the opportunity of living by the Constitution. And that's a very broad statement, but I think the freedoms that I should enjoy should avoid me of being exposed to some of the things that we're presently doing as a nation. This healthcare thing, some other things are going, and we're getting far astray from where I think you want us to be, but abortions, those kind of things, I just think the government's taking us in the wrong place. I'd like to be able to live my own life without somebody impinging on me in terms of my income. I don't make a lot of money, but I think it's pretty bad that I pay as much as I pay in taxes, and there are 49% of the people in our nation today don't pay any taxes. And they're giving out more food stamps and everything else. And I think we're losing something in this country. Freedom is having the opportunity to be successful. And if you're not, the carrot's not out there for you, why try? Why not just sit back and take it? So, but I love this country. This is a great, wonderful country. It is. It's just fantastic, and nicely so. At my point in time in my life, I have some very dear, close friends. They're all very concerned about me and my cancer situation, and they're just so totally forthcoming. I get some of the most beautiful emails I've ever read about the importance of God and good health and that kind of thing. But I don't think I gave you all you wanted. I think you wanted to get in the dirt and the grit. And
there's no right or wrong way to answer
Yeah.
that. I mean, you were really good from the heart. I
Yeah.
appreciate it. Second question is, what does the American flag mean and represent to you as a veteran?
Well, I have one on my mailbox, and I have a 3x5 on a tree in front of my house. And I think that flag needs to be honored. I think it should be taken down in the evening, even though it's an effort to do it. I think that it should be destroyed in the proper manner, and I don't think anybody should ever wear it as part of our clothing. I don't think anybody should ever spit on it, walk on it, burn it, or whatever. It's precious. It's kind of like the Koran. Don't screw with my flag. But we won't go kick their ass like we're getting our butts kicked in Afghanistan. Yeah.
Are you proud to be a veteran?
Extremely so. I'm very proud of the fact that I served my country, and the credits that I have received, the awards and all the things that I have speak very highly, that I'm pretty unique in terms of things that I've done, the schools I've attended, the jobs I've had. My nation has rewarded me by giving me the opportunity to do all those things, and at the same time saying thank you. Yeah. It's a good life.
So you're a motivational speaker. What would you say to our younger generation today about our country, about our freedoms, or even about preserving these stories and learning about these things, and the fact that freedom isn't free. What would you tell a young person today?
Well, I don't really tell people things. What I do is ask questions. When you were growing up, did you feel you had a good, God-fearing home? And I hope you do. Did you? How did you feel when you grew up in that home? You had some points of reference. You had some discipline, didn't you? And I bet it served you very well, hasn't it? And I'm sure you would agree with me that you needed the same thing for your children that your parents did for you and that your fellow man did for you. Can you buy in on that? So when you leave this room today, I want you to leave with a sense of responsibility, not just to yourself, but to everybody in your immediate life, and certainly a sense of responsibility to your country, to do whatever you can do to make it continue to be successful as it has been in the past. Now, that's just I made all that up while I'm talking to you.
But still, I mean, you do talk to them too. I mean,
Oh, yeah, I do.
Question.
Yeah. Well, when I give a seminar, I require that everybody in the room have a name tag on. And so, Larry, I'm talking directly to you and Nancy when I'm talking to you. Well,
Happiness starts within.
that's right. Yeah, that's the next question. Where did it come from? Yeah.
I'm not happy with myself. Nobody's happy around me.
Yeah, but that's what I do. If there's 150 people in the room, I'll probably talk to 100 of them during the hour and a half of my presentation. So I like people. I like interacting with them. So.
Hey, Nancy's not even here. Oh, she didn't get to hear anything.
Yeah, you missed all of that. She's
So
back.
you did pretty good. I thought she was right there behind me.
No.
But, you know, you are unique. I've interviewed about 1,000 veterans in 9 years, and your story is very significant. And I wish we had the time to really go into depth into a lot of these areas, but just some of the people you said, Colin Powell, and some of the people you've been around or met. But I think it's interesting asking these POWs what freedom means, because they were deprived of it for 5 years, some of these guys. And to come home and to look out and see the beauty of the things that we take for granted. That's the thing, our young people, I think they're not bad, but we take things for granted all the time. And,
Tragic, isn't it?
So what can we do for you?
I think it's fine that you gave me the opportunity to go ahead and talk to you. Really, I don't know what you'll do with all of this. Obviously, some of it needs to be cut about LBJ and a few of those things, but...
Well, the Elvis stuff's good. We're going to keep... No. Hey, listen, I'm going to be praying for your health.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You said you're 77 now?
77, yeah.
Okay.
And my wife and I have been married for 49 years, and she's a wonderful caretaker. She's so special to me, yeah. And when I was going through this initial stuff, I had something called MRSA. I don't know if you know what that is. It's a parasite that eats your body. And if everything isn't quite sterile when you have surgery, you frequently get it. And so I'm in the hospital a week, home for 5 days, hospital for a week, and she's right there. I mean, she's doing everything for me. So I'm lucky in that regard, Larry.
I'm going to go back real quickly to combat. How would you define combat?
Combat properly administered is gaining control over your enemy and the terrain in which they're existing. It's there to expressly serve a purpose that whatever your nation dictates it is, and that is to take that piece of terrain and eliminate that tyranny, that conflict that's there.
Do you feel there's fear during the combat on the part of the soldier?
Well, I think what you strive for, Larry, is you try to generate enough discipline that they don't ask, should I be afraid? Now, maybe the first time you're in combat and you hear rounds popping over your head, and there's a distinct noise. You hear the pop out there and the round going over your head. There's a moment when you say, what the fuck am I doing here? And from that point on, you think, well, what's my mission? And I've seen soldiers run into machine guns firing at them, and you're thinking, please don't do that. Get down. Go around the side. Put some fire there to engage that machine gun and then encircle it and get it from the back. But no, you tell them we're going to take that hill, we're going to take that village, and they go and do it. Tragically, sometimes when they're doing it, they get a little brutal in their own way. And that's how we ended up killing some people over it should not have been killed.
Do you believe there aren't any atheists in the foxhole?
I don't think so. I heard that out of World War II, and I really don't think they are, because I've been in positions with people that when we've been in combat, we walked out of it, and we always say, "Thank you, Lord, for letting me come out. Thank you."
Have you ever been with a wounded soldier that was dying, or been around the medics or the medevacs?
That first Bronze Star I got for Valor, I went under fire, machine gun cracking over a guy laying there. He'd been shot, bleeding, and I went and picked him up and carried him 50 yards back to a covered point and loaded him on a helicopter and flew back with him. He died in the helicopter on the way back. But
How do they die in the battlefield? I mean,
well, it's ugly. Mainly they're torso shots that destroy the hearts and the lungs and so forth, and they bleed profusely. It's really messy. If you ever watch any of these NCIS shows and those kind of things.
do they say anything when they're dying, or?
They hold your hands and they look at you with tears in their eyes, because most of them know that they're dying. And the ones that don't, when you get them off the airplane, they're doing everything they can do to convey to you, "Thank you for getting me here." Now, wonderfully so, we're doing such a fantastic job now. Before, we used to have old MASH hospitals back in Korea, and you had to fly for an hour to get back to one. But we did a great job of medical care, and medics on the aircraft picking them up and bringing them out. In the hospitals, we had a lot more hospitals over there too. But we're doing a better job of saving lives.
That's probably part of the stories you don't really dwell on or care to think about.
Well, and that's why, I don't get into personal stories about how many people I shot and how I shot them. And
I'm not going to ask those
yeah,
questions.
I don't do that kind of thing. But as an airborne infantry ranger guy, you spend a lot of time on the ground. Yeah.
Why do they call them grunts?
Because they make a lot of noise when they're struggling.
Interesting
Yeah.
definition.
Yeah, it's pig's grunt, okay? Well, if you're an infantry soldier, you're so close to the ground all the time. You're doing so many crazy things, low crawls onto barbed wire, digging foxholes, and sleeping on ponchos and everything. You're right next to the ground, and those are grunts. And I don't know where the word comes from, but that's how
the best explanation I have, I want to share with you, is when
Okay.
they jumped out of the helicopters with all that gear, they went,
Well, that probably happened.
that's the best I've got.
Well, but they've been calling them grunts since before World War I.
To me, that's not a degrading.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Some people go, well, I was just a grunt. Well,
Yeah.
Don't say
No,
it like that.
No.
It's just that whole, I'm fascinated with.
Well, but you that flows, because guess what you do when people fire at you? You go to the ground. And when you hit the ground, desperately hit the ground, I guess that's a grunt too. So, I don't know.
So you had your share of helicopter time over there, it sounds like.
I did. Matter of fact, I have 4 air medals. And you get air medals for 100 hours of combat time. And so I have 4 air medals. That's 400 hours of combat time. That's in the air, engaging targets, or putting troops on the ground, or flying nap of the earth, reconning and what have you. So I've been there. I've done that. I just wished I had the one that Bud Day has. But I would not have wanted to earn it the way he did. 10 years in Hanoi Hilton, escaping twice and everything else. What a man. Have you had a chance to meet him?
No.
He's a fine man, really a
We
fine man.
interviewed Ron Webb and Howard that was just here too. They were both at Hanoi Hilton.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
we're just about done. Just one question. Do you ever walk into a supermarket or grocery store and you look around and you look at people and you go, wow, I was in Vietnam and I lived this life and it was amazing. And
Yeah.
not that everybody has to know, but do you ever find yourself doing that, reflective on your life like that? Like, you did some amazing things.
Yeah, well, I just had a real treat, Larry. My wife, I told you, has a passion for Elvis Presley. We went on a 4-day Elvis Presley cruise out of Jacksonville down to the Bahamas, and they had an appreciation day for the military. Now, I have outgrown my mess blue uniform, but I just bought a new one. Just paid $500 for a new uniform because I may wear it when I die. But I took my ribbons and all my little badges, my staff badge, joint staff, Army staff, my airborne wings, my CIB, all my medals and so forth, and my Ranger tab, and I put it on my tuxedo. And we're walking around and people came up to me and just, can I shake your hand? Can I have my picture made with you? And these were young people. I'm not talking about older people, but these were people in 25, 30, 35. And it was so rewarding for me. It was a real ego trip for me. So now I have my best blue uniform. I'm going to wear it to the Waffle House next time I go. No, I'm not. But
Do you meet with the Warriors on Thursday morning at the breakfast, the Crispy Warrior group? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
They meet at that egg place down here?
Yeah.
Do you ever go to those meetings?
I do not. No. I'm sorry, Larry, I'm not one of these guys that really wants everybody to know who I am, but I did that for this special trip because my wife wanted me to do it.
That's okay.
But
anyways, one last thing, and I'm gonna hopefully you'll if you watch any of my films, at the end of my films, there's a section where I have the veterans giving salutes into the camera. To me, it's like they're saying goodbye to them, their service. When I ask you from where you're seated, and I understand the protocol for a salute, could you give a salute into the camera? And secondly, if you'd like to say something to a fallen comrade, our veterans serving today, anything you want to say during that salute, you can do that. But are you comfortable with that?
Yeah, I am.
So from where you're seated, Bill, whatever you want, right into the
Okay.
camera.
Ready?
Say something, do a salute. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you for being Americans. Let's all work hard to keep this wonderful nation what it is today. Okay?
Okay. But I just turned the camera back, and I want to thank you for your service.
Oh, thank
You're a remarkable man. I don't want you to die. I don't want nothing to happen to you. No, I'm serious. I'm even praying for you. And your story was amazing, and I appreciate it.
It's my pleasure having met you. And I commend you for what you do.
I appreciate it. Yeah. If I come back here and we go into the schools, I want to bring you with me.
All right.
You can stop and take a picture.